Hi everyone, welcome to Living the Vita Local Podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Faz.
And I'm Rich.
No.
I don't know why I sort of teetered there. I was reading my notes at the same time and it all just sort of went wrong.
It has been a month since we last spoke to each other
forgotten what
correctly.
to do.
Properly.
Correctly.
We've never spoken to her correctly, anyway.
Only speak to each other incorrectly.
Yeah. Fuzzy bear, waka waka. Because we recorded quite a bunch of podcasts at the end of the last month, even correctly, I think that it's really brought into like how giddy I am right now. This is our book club, that we have.
Excited.
I am. I'm really excited to be here.
Two.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Don't even talk about books.
Yeah.
We're doing all of it wrong.
Yeah, other people come and go and stuff, and hope people listen. Yeah. So and again, haven't had any really poor feedback from anybody necessarily.
Well, that's something, because I was paranoid about that Tekken review.
Well, yeah, no, that was
so paranoid.
I am going to be honest. When I last looked, our podcast plays have been a bit quieter the last month. Yep. Now, that might be Tekken related. It might not be. I think it's the sunshine. I think it's the sunshine probably. So it's not a problem. Cool. So what we're doing this week, we are going to be looking at Rare, the development company from the UK. But we're going to be trying to do it through a lens of mostly looking at Rare Replay. So that was the 2015 Xbox One exclusive.
2015?
Yeah, 10 years old.
Back.
Yeah. Jeez. So the now 40-year-old, so it was really weird to me because they're like, we're doing a 30th anniversary of Rare. And it was like, Rare was 1983 and it's now 2015. And it's like, so 2-year development cycle maybe or something like that. I don't know. Which I could fully understand when you have a look at the undertaking they probably had to take to get all of the games from their original position into an Xbox game. I imagine it probably was a bit of hard work. So it's now the 42 years since Rare was formed. 10 years since Rare Replay came out. We've done some collections before on the podcast. And so in this collection there's 30 games. I've just to be open and honest at the start of the pod, I played the first 15, which kind of covers the Spectrum and the NES era. We haven't played every single game, and we're not here to review every single game, but just give you a little bit of a taster of, I guess, Rare's collection, Rare's wares. Yeah. And just kind of give you an idea of what that collection's like, but also other memories and fond or not of Rare. They've done some amazing games such as like GoldenEye, for example, Donkey Kong Country, which of neither of these are on the collection, but we can have a little dabble talk about those in a little while. It kind of made me remember that in our early days of our podcast, I think it was like episode 12, 13, 14, somewhere around there, I remember you did the Atari flashback.
Oh yeah,
classics. I think it was, or collection for the Vita.
Yeah, where I just rampaged through them and did like a 1 or 2 word type thing.
So I remember now.
Back when I was being creative.
Yeah, when we cared. And there was 150 games in that collection, and you did a 1-word review of all those.
I've still got that spreadsheet somewhere. Yeah. I've seen the file recently. Yeah.
I think that was our first foray into spreadsheeting. That was like,
God, it might have been,
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Setting a dangerous precedent.
And I remember we closed that podcast with a bit of a shipping forecast. You started sort of going through them a little bit, which was quite fun. But I've done a few more words for the first 15 games, so I thought I should put a bit more effort in.
I think I've probably got a sentence for each of them this time.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that the reason I brought that up was just because it's really fun to have a collection of games to bring into focus. It's difficult to review every single game ever, but I think that for us, certainly when we sit around having our book club, inverted commas, it's good to kind of go, right, here's a clump of gaming love together.
Clump of gaming love. Get that on a t-shirt.
Is a fucking #1 single somewhere. It's a clump of gaming love. Sorry. But yeah, I think I'm thinking like when, we talked about Llamasoft and how good that was last year. And I remember we kind of did as well, I think we did the EA replay for the PSP and you did the Sega Classic Collection maybe. But yeah, it just reminded me in my head how much I enjoy kind of just doing, here's a load of games all at once, go, just like, kind of get that feel for that.
Rampage through a bit of a collection, and it's good for sort of A, focusing what we're talking about, but B, I just like as someone that has dabbled with collecting, I like collections.
Yes,
they're a good way of getting like a big old set of things. And like nowadays, I guess my biggest problem with them is that some of them seem quite light, right? Like with the notable exception of things like Llama Soft and Atari 50 and things like that, I guess. Like there's quite often where you don't seem to get quite as much bang for your buck now. But that's me being old man yelling at cloud.
Are you suggesting that Atari 50 is not nearly as good as Atari Flashback 150?
No, quite the opposite. But it's the kind of thing where I was bear with me. This is a tangent.
This is cool.
This is a tangent. But I was like, you know what? Like the other day, I was like, I really fancy playing some like old school Mortal Kombat. Okay, I will go and I must have a collection with it on somewhere.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I've got the Midway arcade collection on the Xbox from back when. Oh, it's not on there. Okay, cool, right. And pottering around, it's like, oh no, I don't have anything with it on, but I do have something that I downloaded back in the day. And yet you can't seem to play any of them easily nowadays on modern platforms. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got your Capcoms of the world that are constantly putting out like repackaged collections of the old games and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, and I think, again, off the back of the Tekken stuff, I know there were plenty of people that were saying, well, sure, the Season 2 patch when it landed has not gone according to plan. I think we can all agree. Why don't you just release a collection of old Tekkens?
Yeah.
Like, how much goodwill that would get you back from that community if you just say, you know what, we screwed up, but look, here are the first 5 games in a collection with rollback netcode. Boom. Off you go. And so I think there's definitely a place in everybody's hearts for them.
Well, that's reminding me as well to say that I did pick up Worms Armageddon Anniversary on the back of your Sterling review, and it is exactly as you would expect. They haven't really touched the game too much, I don't think necessarily. Like they've kept all of those. The ability to be able to tinker and make it however you want it to be. And I was playing it with my boys at home and stuff, and they were loving it. Like, absolutely just like once they understood what was kind of going on, they were like, I was. I don't want to say I was feigning that, to say that I was letting them win. That is, and I think that I was eliminated first. The bots are bastards. Like they took me out big time. But so the boys took care of business with me. But the bit that is interesting is that they do have that the Digital Eclipse-esque museum timeline, and that's really good. I'd say it is, if you get it on offer, say 15. I think it was 15.50 for me. I think it was worth having that to be able to play it on the Switch. It does look really good, and also to have all that information around Worms, that it kind of coalesces that it's not just about Worms Armageddon. Like they do the entire history of Worms.
Oh, nice.
So they go up to and beyond, which I was like, oh, brilliant, because I didn't expect that necessarily. Yeah. I kind of thought maybe they'd do a bit more about just Armageddon, but it wasn't. It was everything. So I was like, oh, great. And I know that I kind of looked at the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles collection that was on, I think it's on PS Plus.
The Cowabunga collection.
Yes, yeah. And that one's a little bit different because that one kind of doesn't necessarily have a timeline to it, but it's kind of got a bit of here's the artwork, here's some comics, here's some intros to TV shows.
Extra materials and stuff like that, but it's not quite laid out in the same format.
But again, there is a serious Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle obsession running through my house at the moment. Honestly, we must have watched the 2017 movie on Netflix. But I say Rowan, my 3.5-year-old, must have watched it. And this isn't, I'm not lying here, it must have started it 15 times this week. He must have watched the start of that movie so many times in the last week. And I don't know what I need to do to stop that from happening, but it's not that bad, I guess. It's a great movie, so it's good that he's enjoying it. But yeah, I probably need to wean him off that somehow. Not onto Minecraft like Oscar's on. Jesus, la 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 lava, chicken. Have you seen Minecraft the movie yet? No. It's all right. It's all right. Yeah, it's okay. A lot of gaming content on television and movies at the moment. I feel like
money.
Yeah, Minecraft. Black Mirror is back on Netflix. Devil May Cry series on Netflix. I've not watched any of them yet, but I've heard really good things about Devil May Cry actually. So I think I'll probably watch that. So, but yeah. Anyway, sorry, massive tangent over and done with.
Say that was the book club.
We
section.
have not seen each other in a month. Back to Rare. So, yeah, Rare were born in 1983 as Ultimate Play the Game. That is one of the worst gaming developer titles I've ever heard, if I'm going to be honest. Like, you can't think of that. You probably had like Atari and Technos and Taito and Ultimate Play the Game. Like,
have we got like any punctuation in there?
No, just a statement.
Not even like Ultimate Play the Game or like
just Ultimate Play the Game.
All right.
So I can understand that they changed their name to Rare.
A single word.
That happened in the late 80s. So, and it's really funny because the Stampers, Chris and Tim Stamper, are really well known for being quite secretive. And I read it's because they crunched so much. They were like, we haven't got time to do interviews. We've had like, and I don't know if this is true or not, but they were like making out. They're like, we've had 2 Christmas mornings off in the last 3 years or whatever. Like that's all we've had. And I'm like, that's a lot. That's full on. So that would explain why they pumped out as many games as they did and how well they did. So, but yeah, they controlled the sort of the early days of Rare, and I think so. They moved to working with Nintendo a lot after that, and then they were bought by Xbox Game Studios in the early 2000s. So, they've been about. It's funny because since Rare Replay came out in 2015, they've only really released Sea of Thieves, which is a live service, so you can kind of understand that they maintain that. And that was a big thing for Game Pass, as was Rare Replay, actually. I think like they were sort of the first few things to go onto Game Pass to kind of, Microsoft clearly trusted Rare to be like, right, we need you to launch this with something.
Yeah.
And I think Sea of Thieves was kind of middlingly received, if that's a word, and then... But then I think it's got much stronger in the sort of 8 or 9 years. I think a lot of people like it still. Like it now. And then they brought out a Battletoads remake in 2020, and that is it. That's all Rare have done since Rare Replay. So we don't have to catch up too much.
Well, that's
after that. Yeah, they are making a game, or have been for about 6 years now, apparently, called Everwild. So apparently, really well looked forward to. Phil Spencer visited Rare, I think, in February this year, I read, and said, yeah, it's still happening. So,
they're still working.
Yeah, exactly. Rare is still here, so that's good. So, hopefully nothing bad has happened. But so that's
like
a little bit
Perfect Dark update reboot.
Yes,
type thing
yeah.
on the
No, I don't know,
cards as well?
but I don't know if that's them doing it or not. Obviously we've seen
That's true. Is it them?
the trailer. I'd be surprised if they've pushed it elsewhere, but I can't see it on their slate to.
Interesting.
Upcoming,
Okay.
So, and considering there is footage of that game, one assumes therefore then it must be someone else.
Someone's making it.
Yes. Rare are like, what the fuck?
Why did we let that IP go?
So I'm going to touch on that IP as well. The only thing I wanted to mention before we get into the actual collection itself then as well was that when we did our N64 versus PS1 games earlier in the year, top 25s, of that 25 N64 games, how many do you think were Rare games?
Oh, flipping heck. Quite a high percentage.
Yeah. 6 out of, so 25%-ish.
Yeah.
So, and if you think that's just one console, and that of that one console's best games ever, pretty much like, kind of widely agreed.
Yeah.
6 of them are Rare games. They floated Nintendo for a good period. Apart from Nintendo self-developed games, Rare did a pretty good job for them. So, I guess, have you played any of this collection at all? Have you dabbled in it, or have you ever had it?
So the collection itself, no.
Okay.
But for the purposes of this review, I think I've got about 9 of them that I played on various platforms.
Yeah.
There's a couple that are cheating.
Okay.
I should warn you.
That's fine.
But
I'm
we'll
totally into
get to that.
That's cool. Okay, so I would say it's pretty ridiculous how much content they've managed to gather within this game, really, and the way that they present it as well. So I didn't really think about this till almost last night, really. But yeah, the job that they must have had to do to port these games from Spectrum-esque games and make the controls work as well as they do and make them as simple as possible, and also add all the presentation bits around that, so the menu music and how you can actually interact and play the games is just, it's amazing. It's so impressive. Like, I don't know if it would have been appreciated as much at the time if you weren't kind of thinking about reviewing the game, but when you kind of sit there and think about it, you go, holy shit, they've done a great job of bringing together 30 of their games. So you think about that, like, even when I talk about the first 15 games, you would call them maybe smaller experiences, probably because of just the age of the games, and that's what happened back in the day.
Yeah.
And then you roll in the next 15 games when you start getting the N64 and the Xbox games, the Banjo-Kazooies, the Viva Pinatas, all those kind of things that you kind of go, wow, those are, the Perfect Zeros, Perfect Darks, thank you, Perfect Dark Zero even. All those, and you think about, wow, these are just available for £30. Like, is it 30 quid? It's just
it's crazy.
It's mental. So yeah, there was some criticism. And probably, maybe it's still, well, probably not so much now because they're more widely available for what they are, but Donkey Kong Country wasn't on there and GoldenEye wasn't on there, two of their, I guess, bigger IPs. But you can play Donkey Kong Country now on the Switch Online. You can play GoldenEye on Game Pass. They're very...
And Switch Online.
Yeah, and Switch Online, yeah. So it's all quite widely available anyway. So I don't think those criticisms necessarily stand as much anymore, especially... because they're available to me now for whatever I pay for my services. That is I would have liked them to have been on here, but at the same time, it's almost nice to have the spotlight somewhere else as well. Because I maybe would have found myself kind of going, oh, here's the big boys. I'll see what they're like. Whereas actually, I really enjoyed going back and seeing things that I'd never really played before, or I'd heard of and had heard like great things about. There's also some games in there that I'd probably maybe seen the title of in Retro Gamer or something like that, or skipping past on the internet and things on, Retro Dodo or whatever, and not really paid any attention to whatsoever.
Yeah.
What's your kind of sort of knowledge and feel about, like, I guess the game set really, or like, and have you played any of the older games that are on there in terms of like Jetpack or RC Pro Am, or have you played any of the?
I think I have. I don't know I have.
Yeah.
I don't wish to sound flippant, but I genuinely would be struggling. Like, I think, you say Jetpack, and I think that my brain is telling me that Joust is Jetpack. Yeah. And I know damn well it's not, but there is that little part of my brain that's like, but it could be.
Yeah, it's not far away. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's... So I can't sit here and confidently say that I have.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a SNES or anything like that back in the day. N64 would have been my first kind of contact with them. And then after that, basically, anything that I've got of theirs on the Xbox and 360, say, was basically the N64 stuff that I was trying to get hold of again when I didn't have access to an N64 or Switch Online or da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess the part of me that was kind of familiar with Rare's work is actually, in the grand scheme of how long they've been around, not all that long. I think I've got like a very little sort of slice of it there.
And I think that they, from what you can see at their, if you go back and look at their timeline, actually they were very, very, I guess, productive for, the first 15 games from this collection that I've played aren't every single Rare game, but that's from 1983 to like 1991, kind of. So I was plowing my way through this, thinking, I've touched quite a lot of these games. I looked at the timeline, and actually, it was sort of an 8 or 9 year period, really.
Yeah.
And then there is a bit of a sort of natural divide where you kind of get into Donkey Kong Country, then the N64 games, and and then almost like, and then their Xbox games. That is in so. That you kind of can see where almost not different developers per se, but almost how their team kind of fluctuated a little bit, and that's actually true what happened really. So
because didn't they end up like doing some Connect stuff or something like that?
Yeah, so yes,
is any of that on the collection?
No, it's
assuming not.
No, it's not. But that is interesting that it's not. But that's kind of where the collection sort of ends. It kind of, I think is it Banjo Kazooie, or is it 2E maybe? Nuts and Bolts Banjo Kazooie, I think it is, like one of the sequels, which is like 2008, 2009, I think it is. That's kind of like where they do draw the end of the timeline.
Got it.
And I'm going to be honest, it feels like that's kind of like a good place for that. I can understand why they did that as a bit of an end of a story sort of thing. And it's funny because when you look at some of the games they were releasing, even when they were owned by Xbox in the early 2000s, like they were still doing quite a lot of Nintendo DS games and stuff, like development as well, not just publishing and things like that. So it is interesting to think that they, like I said, they've been around, they've done lots of different things, and this is just a bit of a snippet even of that. But yeah, so the collection, it's so well presented. There is a historical like timeline gallery situation, just like we talked about before with other collections, which I would feel was maybe one of the first times that I would have been aware of something being done of this sort of type, where but in this circumstance, you unlock the gallery. So basically it's called Rare Revealed, I think it is.
Right.
And so the different sections of the game, there is the games themselves, which are completely unlocked from scratch from the get-go, which is a brilliant thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I know you've paid £30 for it, but they could have easily have gone, right, we're going to hide some of these games later, and you have to do certain tasks in certain games to unlock these games. But that isn't the case, which is really, really good to see. But what they have done is attached a stamp system to the games themselves, which effectively almost like an achievement system. And you still get Xbox achievements in the same way that you would any other game. But the stamps themselves are an internal currency to unlock Rare Revealed. Right. So effectively, for the history gallery, you have to play more games and hit more... I don't want to call them checkpoints necessarily, but almost like checkpoints within the games themselves to unlock stamps. And these stamps then unlock the history of Rare. I'm really conflicted about how I felt about that. Because on one hand, I thought it was really quite presumptuous to think that people are going to have enough time and to play every single game to then... Because I wanted to access the information, A, for the review for the podcast, but also B, because I was really interested. And I think that the very first video is, it's like, what makes a Rare game, for example. And... That's the kind of thing that I'd probably want one or two videos kind of unlocked at the start, really, but none are at all. You have to
none at all?
No, but on the flip side of that, I kind of get that it's good because you earn a stamp pretty much for playing just booting up any game.
Right.
So immediately you can get 30 stamps pretty much by just sort of going into a game and starting it, and then I think the first one is like 3 stamps. So like it would just, if you were desperate to see the videos, you could just go into any game, kind of like play 5 minutes and then get a stamp for it. So it's not horrendous that you have to do that. But at the same time, it is good because it does force you to go away and play the back catalogue as well. Like, you can't just kind of skimp and go, I'm going to play 3 or 4 games and then access all the videos. It was a bit off for me. It was a bit weird that they didn't make it so you could just see everything, but I kind of get what they were trying to do.
Yeah, maybe that's the genius of how Digital Eclipse approach it nowadays, where they've realised that people find that stuff interesting.
Yeah, I think if Atari 50 or Lamasoft had existed before this had, I don't think that would be the system.
Yeah, they would have approached it differently.
But you can play each game in a certain sort of way. So the older games are set up so that they've given you so much quality of life stuff. You go into a little menu, they'll tell you all the controls that have been ported to the Xbox controller from whatever would have been on the Spectrum, the VIC-20 and things like that. They've done a great job of doing that. Each game is presented almost within its own little gallery, so it's got lovely little music playing, and then each game has it's called a snapshot. Basically, a sort of list of achievements that you can get in that game to get certain stamps. Those snapshots will be usually, if I'm going to be honest, quite difficult sort of objectives to achieve within the game. But at the same time, what they've done is within the menu, not necessarily hidden, but also not advertised, is that there is, for all the older games, there's a rewind button, just like there is for, say, the Switch Online, for example.
Yeah.
And there's also an infinite life button, and infinite time button.
Someone's thought about that.
Exactly. So, and certainly when I get to the games a little bit later, you'll sort of, I'll see and speak about where they're good and useful. It's a really, and when I say that, a really, really well put together collection and ported really well together to make it so that all these games look the best they've probably ever looked, and also you can play them exactly how they were pretty much when they're released, and also with today's modern trimmings to make you feel better about yourself when you're sort of struggling away at Jetpack or Lunar Jetman. So yeah, it's really cool. One thing I did notice about and it's just a bit of an aside really, is like when you look at the gallery and start to unlock the featurettes, it's amazing. Everybody who works at Rare looks like they work at Rare. And what do you think I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is people who've maybe never seen that much daylight.
Wow.
Probably, affable British mid-40s. That kind of those lovely people that you kind of look at the street and go, ho hum. It's almost like a lovely. I kind of feel like a Little Big Planet / Wallace and Gromit sort of air around Rare. It just feels like a lovely creative atmosphere where everyone just wants to be everyone's friends, and they'll just sort of pootle along little talking head stories, and you just kind of they just seem like genuinely nice people who really care about the video games they make. So all the featurettes definitely sit really well with the history of and kind of the games that you see coming out with them and stuff. I mean, the one where they talk about making Conker's Bad Fur Day, for example, which I'm sure you touch on at some point, and Banjo-Kazooie, that the love they seem to pour into those games or have. You could just see them sat there with a smirk on their face, just remembering the good times, just like, oh, that crunch. Oh, yeah. But it's just like, oh.
Happy days.
Yeah. But it was amazing, though. And so it's really nice to sort of see that it kind of, I guess, coalesces together to see this is all the love and care we've put into bringing this collection together, and actually that was true the day that we made the games as well. And you just see that happening, and that's when the featurettes are really useful to you, I think, and that history sort of thing. Anything I guess up to the N64, it does give you all those quality of life things, so you don't have to necessarily be at a high skill level, I would say, to be able to go back to this. I really feared for my life, if I'm going to be honest. When I was like, oh, I'm going to look at the older ones, but it's really nice to see that they just care about the gamer. And like I said, the only thing that I'd kind of be a bit like, was the stamp sort of collection or anything. But any questions or notes at this point? Just before I dip into the earlier games, and then you look at the more recent ones.
I've got one slightly earlier game to talk about, which was originally on the NES.
Cool.
That's kind of the only bit I've got. I did not spend long playing many of these games.
No, me either.
Because I spent a lot of time playing quite a few of them when I was younger. So there's a fair bit of
I've done my time.
I dipped in and was like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what I want to say about this.
Okay.
But I have just looked up one thing that I'm just going to write in my notes because I do need to mention it. No, it genuinely is. It's kind of the cornerstone of one of my points. I was like, that would be a really good point to make, and then I totally forgot to do the research.
It's like, to reveal, La Reveal Magnifico about the podcast and stuff. Like, we have notes in front of ourselves and stuff, but sometimes I'll kind of go, right, I've got notes, but I'll try not to look at them because I just got a feel and a vibe and a flow. And sometimes, like it's about to happen right now, I'm going to try and crash through 15 games where I've written about 3 or 4 sentences for each. Honestly, my writing is the worst it's ever been for these games. So I'm at some point I might go, what the fuck? What have I written? I was trying to decipher it last night. I was like, what?
I do have one question though. Mm-hmm. How are we doing the arbitrary score?
Oh, right, okay. So for me, I've kind of given an arbitrary score to the collection.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
I didn't think we should do arbitrary scores for the games.
Each individual game. No,
because
that's fine. I have not done either.
Which is fine, because you haven't played the collection.
Exactly. So I'm comfortable with this.
And that's why I kind of just choking on a Sour Patch Kid there. And that's why I was kind of trying to go a bit to the nth degree about how they're presenting the collection, because even before you get to the games, I think that I really grew into loving seeing the collection and how it was presented. And
Got you.
there's even like the opening, I guess, video is a goofy theatre show with all the characters kind of like, but presented as cardboard cutouts on sticks.
Oh,
and
yeah,
they're going, dun, 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 and when you first see it, you kind of go, what? And then you kind of go, no. And then you see the featurettes and you see the people and you see the way the games are presented, you go, oh, no, I get it now.
It makes sense.
That bit now makes real sense. And then, so when it comes up again, which it only does, I guess, when you get into the game again. So just to give you a little bit of an idea as well, that the late Xbox games are the end up being the 360 ports.
Okay.
So they're actually separate too. So if you download this, for example, from Game Pass, which I should still say it's still available on, you actually see the newer games, the bigger games, are separate games. And then the older games are all sat within the collection. I think it's only for like sort of last 8 games, I think maybe, that happens. But it's you still access them through the collection. So it's very easy and to be able to sort of navigate to those games. It doesn't make it any harder, really.
Does that mean you can manage your storage a little bit though by like getting rid of them or anything like that?
I don't know. I think it all sits under, from what I could tell.
Yeah.
It all sat under the same sort of storage umbrella, if you will.
Sorry, I just realised that was a really boring question.
No, not at all. No, it's an important question because if you've only got 10 gigs left on your storage, you can't do it.
I had a similar situation with the Halo Master Chief Collection, and then realised like, oh, actually, I can chop and change and re-download and undownload and all that.
I remember when I first downloaded the Master Chief Collection, and when it was on Xbox One, I had terrible internet, and I'm not even joking. It took me like 30 hours to download the Master Chief Collection, and it was just like ridiculous. That was probably the first game I owned, I think, from Xbox One, maybe. And I don't regret a single minute of that download speed, but it was just like, seeing it. I was like, oh yeah, that's staying on. That's like that Xbox One's not turning off for like 3 days. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of the games. I am going to give you a score for each of the games, but we're not going to write it down like just keep it forever. Just it was in my head. So I'll tell you what year it is out, tell you what system it was mainly out for. There is various ports of all these games, but what predominantly... So, I mean, it's dead easy. Predominantly, the first sort of games were all on Spectrum, ZX Spectrum. And then the later ones that I played were on the NES. That's pretty much it, really.
Right.
There's a couple of Commodore 64, a couple of VIC-20s, but they're mostly developed for the Spectrum. So the very first game on the collection then is Jetpack. So I've got Build Rocket, Collect Fuel, Blast Aliens, Avoid Aliens, Get Disorientated by the Screen Wrap. Super difficult, but simple. Had a blast. So the Screen Wrap, does that make sense in terms of... So it's a one screen...
I mean, it makes sense to me, but
explain
it to people now.
Exactly, yeah, sorry. So that's what I was kind of trying to do. So the Screen Wrap is where you have a one-screen system, so that all of the game takes place on one screen, and your avatar of a person, you can move into the left side of the screen and you pop out the right side of the screen.
Like Pac-Man. Yes,
very much so, thank you. And then also, not just you, but also... your gunshots do that as well, which is exactly
like Pac-Man.
I know. So that's like crazy because like you're moving around so quickly as when you're with your jetpack, obviously, as you would be, and so when the aliens that are sort of trying to, I don't know what they're trying, I assume prevent you from, blasting off or just being dicks, basically. And you're trying to collect all this fuel for your ship to go and your parts for your ship. You can very easily kind of run into your own, like, menacing self in terms of, like, the shots that you're firing to hit, like, the aliens with and stuff. It's like, and... when you're running away from, an alien on one screen, but actually running into the other side of the screen is just going to make you run into another alien. It's a bit crazy. Really fun, though. Really, really good for a one-screen game. And the little snapshot things are fun. That is in, so I won't say this for every single game, but, they'll be like, for example, it'll be like, collect 5 diamonds and make sure can you wrap around the screen 5 times without dying, which sounds... easy, and it's not all it's really difficult, and that'll unlock a stamp. So those are little things you kind of end up trying to do to be able to get more featurettes, really. So it's cool because it makes you spend more time with each of the games, because you kind of go, right, I get the idea of this game now. I know how to do this. And if I wanted to, I could sit and do more and more levels. Obviously, for doing the purpose of podcast and stuff, I was a bit like, all right, I'm not going to do everything and do loads of time with each one. I try to spend about an hour with each one, but also try and do some of the snapshots to see. And they were almost like, they were kind of like a way to go, see how difficult this game is if you try to do this, because this is what the game used to be. Yeah. But also, if you want to, here's some infinite lives. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so it was good to be able to kind of switch that on at some point and go, right, okay, I can look at this now.
Yeah.
And spend a bit more time with it. Lunar Jetman was the next game from 1983. Oh, sorry, 8 out of 10 for Jetpack. Lunar Jetman, 6 out of 10. Hardest game I've ever played. Drop a bomb off at enemy bases using a lunar rover that protects you from an absolute fucking onslaught of aliens. So many mechanics. Shoot, drive, fly, pick up stuff, drop off stuff, mend some gaps with some girders. Like, honestly, like, I could not do this game without the rewind button. So to think that this is, you know, the warts and all, they even put all like the, I don't want to say like the kinks and the jank in there, but they keep like what the game should look like. They've done a really good job of keeping that.
Yeah.
And apparently when I read up about it, they actually worked on doing that. They were like, they tried to bring everything with it. They weren't just like, oh, here's a beautiful version of it. They're like, oh, this is what it was like.
Yeah. Not spruce it up.
Yeah.
Like,
and
yeah.
I could not play that fucking game. That was so hard. Like, as in, I didn't understand what was kind of going on, even though it explained to me. Like, just like, so, 6 out of 10 for me. I thought that was just a little bit too inaccessible compared to Jetpack. So you get an idea where we're going here. 1983 again. So 3 games in 1 year. Like, the crunch is real. Spectrum once more. A tick attack. Love it. What the fuck is going on? I was like, who even cares? Do you know what I mean? Who even cares what's going on? I'm collecting keys from rooms to escape a dungeon. I'm getting mauled by standard ghouls / monsters. My life, chart effectively, bar is a roast chicken that kind of getting eaten away. The falling animation when you fall down the dungeons is amazing. Like, it is, your character, like when you're moving through the screen, just makes this weird. The footsteps like, and then you fall down like different wells in this dungeon. And it's like, it looks like the visor down the Death Star run, like is it sort of like you falling down this well. And yeah, that was difficult because you're kind of trying to work your way around a map without having a map. And there are maps online that I could look at if I wanted to, but all I did was I just knocked on infinite time and infinite lives. And you've got to go around and try and find these different parts of this key and the different colours. I mean, I know a lot of this would have been in the manual, but man, I had a great time playing it. It was so much fun. It was so exploratory, but at the same time, like, really oppressive. Like, as in these ghouls just show up out of nowhere and just start fucking mauling you, and your chicken's turning into bones, and you're like, oh, I've worked so hard to try and get through all of these rooms, and I think I'm nearly there, but I have no idea if I'm nearly there. But yeah, it was crazy. So nice. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. 1984, moving on a year then. Oh, sorry, a Tick Attack, 8 out of 10. Yeah, really good. And then it kind of hit a bit of a bump, I want to be honest. So, Saber Wolf. So, Saber Wolf, Underworld, and Night Law. They are all part of the Saberman game, sort of, not trilogy, I guess, but like, whatever it is, not even a franchise, but the Saberman saga. That'll do. There we go. Thank you. Honestly, Saberman, like, is in just a man with a hat. I don't even remember him having a saber.
Explorer dude type?
Yeah. And I found him extremely wanky, would be the way to describe him. Not a fan of Saber Man.
I mean, in that respect, British Explorer.
Yeah, pretty much. So, I think probably lent into it hard.
That,
so this is on the Spectrum as well. So Saber Wolf, the first one. So this was similar mechanics to a Tick Attack, but in the jungle. It was far worse, if you ask me. There was so much going on. Everyone in that jungle just needs to be a bit more chill. Like there's this sort of like, there's just loads of animals, plants, tribesmen, and there's just a wolf being a bit of a wanker following you around. Like, everyone's just chasing you around this jungle. I imagine it's probably just like the real jungle, except like
this sounds like some fever dreams
hyped.
I've had.
Honestly, it looks just like one. It looks just like one. The colours and everything. It's got weight. Like whereas a Tic Tac kind of felt like, even though there's a lot going on in every room, you kind of feel like you're flowing around that a little bit. Whereas honestly, Sabrewulf just felt like it was just the jungle going in your face. You're like, no, just constantly like. So the infinite lives really helped. But then it also made me realise that in the real game without infinite lives, that it felt like it would have been near impossible. Like, so a Tic Tac felt like the good version of that game, and it felt like they're just kind of redoing it with a different avatar and a few and just it was beautiful colours, but yeah, really quite scary.
Yeah.
It made me feel like I didn't want to go outside again. 5 out of 10. Underworld in 1984, Spectrum / Commodore 64. So the same guy from the last game, but you're kind of underground in some caverns. I was sort of jumping around uncontrollably, like between different screens. I read there was 600 different screens. I probably saw about 50, and I felt a bit done. The enemies at the start seemed to look like angry parrots / jellyfish. I was bouncing off them a lot. Is this what games passed for in 1984? I just put fuck me. Like, just that was the worst game of the lot for me. And these are all subjective scores. These are just how I felt after an hour with the game. 3 out of 10 for that one, right? As in, that one it did not gel with me. I just didn't have a clue what was happening to me. Like that one definitely felt like a fucking fever dream. Stepping back up, so Night Law. I think Night Law is like really well regarded, and a lot of people, and I think that's a lot to do with. So Rare won these first companies to kind of implement the isometric view sort of situation, and to get that out of the Spectrum. I think a lot of people remember that well about this game and think, oh yeah, that it looks incredible. You kind of get like some sort of 3D effect out of it. The game itself, so we're the same guy again, but we're kind of like sort of we turn into a werewolf every 30 seconds, pretty much. Like literally, you spin round on the spot and you turn into a werewolf. You're clearly trying to find some sort of like I think you're collecting some potion to make yourself not a werewolf anymore.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it felt like it probably had a bit more going on, and it had calmed down a bit since sort of the last 2 games, I think. But I was still like, I didn't feel the same vibe I got from a Tic Tac or Jetpack, like as in this kind of like this era of the Saberman. Saberman can fuck off, basically. I'm just not interested in these games. So this was a bit better than what's the last one even called? Underworld? Like, I'm looking at my notes. This is what I mean about notes. I'm like, what even was that one called? So Night Law, a bit better, but I still wouldn't necessarily recommend amazingly to go back to it. I gave it a 5. It wasn't too bad.
Maybe the crunch was making him a little bit tired.
Yeah, maybe. But then we start to hit a bit of a sweet spot. Okay. So 1985, Gunfight. So I've put here we go now. That was literally my feeling. Like, and it's not even that much of a better game than the last game, but I was just like more excited to be out of Saber Zone. Like, but yeah, this one was really interesting. So you're a sheriff going around and cleaning up your town, and it isn't like sort of the isometric sort of mold again. Basically, there's lots of like enemies knocking around this town, and it's a procedurally generated town. As you move around, the buildings kind of come into view, but they're almost like sort of, I guess, stick angle buildings, but they also, you can walk into them and they exist within inside. Cool. And it looks like the most basic sort of looking jail cell, for example, but it looks like something. Yeah. And you kind of walk around these towns, you get yourself into duels in which like it will take you into first person mode, and you have to move your trigger hair around, whatever. Crosshair. Thank you very much. hair, around and shoot dudes. So you do a dueling sort of thing, and you can also like. There's lots of fast-moving residents who seem to be panicking, and they like knock life off you as well. So you've got to avoid them as well. So there's lots going on, but in a good way. Like as in, so nice. Yeah, it was a really fun game. Actually, I really enjoyed that. I wouldn't say it was again up there as one of the best, but there was just more going on in that game than there was in the last 3 games for me. So 6 out of 10 for Gunfight. Then we start getting into the NES section of the Rare Replay. The very first game that was a non-Japanese Nintendo game, this game, Slalom. So it's a skiing game. I'll just go with my notes. Yes! Exclamation mark. Banger is what I put. So it's downhill skiing slalom around obstacles, and the time runs out to get to the finish. That's a really nice sort of mechanic there that kind of like just, it's not just get to the finish, it is get to the finish and do it well, you know, within the time limit. And that's good because that kind of just starts to give you that sort of sense of, right, okay, I need to get good at this. And the simple mechanics are really good. You know, don't fuck up. Great music, really good as well. So, you know, there was lots of difficulty variation in the things that sort of the obstacles it's throwing in the way as well, and also the speed that you can vary yourself going. This one, it wasn't necessarily super well reviewed at the time, but I really enjoyed it. It's 7 out of 10 for me. So that's from 1986. So we're starting to stretch out the time of development of games here. Yeah. So 1988. Come on, Rare. Do you know what I mean? Like, at this point, they would become not Ultimate Play the game. They would have become Rare by now. So, but you know, 2 years to develop one game. But you know, ultimately, it was the right decision. So this is
ultimately,
RC Pro Am. So it is, I think, well regarded as one of the best games on the NES, and rightly so. This game is awesome. So it's a top-down arcade racer in RC cars with power-ups and obstacles. What does that kind of sound a bit like in sort of, you know, nice little karty cars bobbing around with power-ups? It's like, yeah, it's definitely a precursor to one of the most important games, you know, like kicking around at the moment.
Micro Machines.
Yes, well, exactly. So I was going to say as well, it's very Micro Machines, also very Wipeout and very F-Zero before I even think about Mario Kart. So, yeah, all those things kind of roll into this. I use the word shitty wank bags quite a lot for my competitors. They did not care about me at all. Like, you know, like after the race, I don't imagine we were shaking hands. Like I was livid in some of these. So, but really good, really frustrating racing where you think I've got it. The next time I've got it. The next time I will do it. Absolutely loved it. There was quite a bit of laggy banding, if I'm going to be honest. That it really annoying when you kind of think I've got this race in the bag, and all of a sudden someone comes out of absolutely nowhere. You're like, come on now. But apart from that, yeah, it was really, really good. 9 out of 10 for RC Pro Am. That was released the month I was born, actually. So that might be the synergy that I needed with that. So
inherent connection with it.
Yeah. We're on to the last few games then that I played on the collection. So then you couldn't listen to Rich for a while, Jesus. So 1989, Cobra Triangle. I'd never heard of this game before I played on Rare Replay. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I used to live near a place called Winner's Triangle.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they're related.
No Cobras.
No.
So I just put, holy shit, this is fun. How did I not know about this game? Great music. This was like Micro Machines meets Miami Vice. So you are.
I mean, yeah. Sign me up.
Like, so you were in a little speedboat, and you get loads of different like eclectic objectives. That's hard to say. Where like you race, but then the next thing you're getting rid of mines. The next level you're saving people from the water, while other targets are trying to destroy or steal the people from you. You have to destroy like actual moving targets as you go in. You destroy boats. You then have to kill a dragon monster. Honestly, it was so good. It was so good. Like, I fully recommend anybody that's never heard of it or played that game, go play yourself an hour of Cobra Triangle, and you'll feel pretty good about yourself. So, just really fast paced, really receptive, really colourful, a lot of fun. 9 out of 10 for Cobra Triangle. Nice. And I would say that was probably my favourite game out of the early games. So next one, 1990 NES. So this is the Snake Rattle and Roll. So this is kind of like where you are building up a snake, just like a lot of games kind of do now. But this was in the isometric mold as well. it looked really good, and it's a brilliant concept. Like, so you're going around eating these jumping nibblies, if you will, to make your snake bigger. You've got enemies to avoid, and you have to get past these enemies or destroy enemies to get to the end of the level. You have to make your snake a certain weight that you go and you weigh in at the end, where you hit a bell if you're heavy enough, and then you snake off through this little tunnel to the next level. Really, that's really lovely. Really fiddly execution. Like, it seemed fun and original, but the controls I wasn't really gelling with this game at all. I felt myself feeling like there was unfair sort of controls in terms of, like, I just didn't. I think that what it was that, and this might be the only one where I felt like potentially using an analog stick, for example, that didn't feel like the right thing to be using for this. You probably needed to have just the D-pad and have you kind of almost jumping to square with your snake. And I think it almost felt like it was a bit off, really. So I don't know if that was to do with the port or not, but that was the only thing that I felt it might have been. It was good, but it wasn't essential. I didn't find myself sticking around for that game for too long. I was kind of did like its first 4 levels, and I was like, oh, it's a good challenge, and it's original, the idea, and I like sort of what's going on, but not incredible.
Thank you, bye.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So 6 out of 10 for Snake Rattle and Roll. So we're moving into the 90s even further now then. So 1990, so there's 3 out in 1990. Solar Jetman. Now, the reason this is out because Rare didn't even develop this game. Basically, there was a company called Zippo Games, I think, from Manchester. And then I can't remember how it worked out, but in the end, Rare finished the game off and published it for them.
Right.
But it is on the Rare replay. So they're taking full credit for it, I think, maybe. So, but basically, it's another sort of like jetpack-esque sort of game where you take a little pod out into this world, this alien world, and you've got to go and carry parts of your spaceship back to your big spaceship, and you've also got to fuel up your big spaceship to leave, which is kind of a bit like what Jetpack does, really. Except you have this little pod, and there's also lots of different parts of the level to explore. You kind of go down to little caverns, and there are enemies shooting at you from the side, or there's enemies flying around and things. It's pretty fun. Really solid, really simple mechanics. Really good idea using the original jetpack and kind of just, rather than having one screen, moving it around different screens and things. I found it, I said it was simple good and also simple bad. Almost like, I guess, they didn't feel like there was a lot more to it, really. It definitely isn't a Rare game, would be what I say. I was surprised to see this on here because I was a bit like, is this their game? I don't really know. Like, as in, it was okay. It was okay. So yeah, I'll give it a 7 because I thought I was enjoying myself, but it was stuff to sink my teeth into. But do you know what? I'm going to skip Digger Rock. Digger T Rock was absolutely fine. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I just didn't really gel with it, to be honest. So you know what? It was just a lot of caving, a lot of rocking and caving.
A lot of caving.
Yeah, that's all. There you go. There's my review. A lot of caving, claustrophobia, done. My last one then was Battletoads. So this was 1991 for the NES. 9 out of 10. Battletoads. I tell you what, I only played 3 levels because I couldn't get past the fucking turbo tunnel. 9 out of 10. Absolutely amazing. So much fun in the first few levels. And I was still like, this is the hardest game, I think, second hardest after, Lunar Jetman. One of the hardest games I've ever played. But yeah, inch perfect sort of to beat the enemies sort of situation with this platforming, a real story and plot behind it, some fun characters. Yeah, really, really cool. I really enjoyed it. I couldn't fucking do it though. Even with the infinite lives and stuff, I was still like, God, this is hard. But my general verdict on Rare Replay as a collection, before you get into the few games that you're going to talk about, I thought this was actually incredible, to be honest. That is, and I really did like. I thought the only little thing that I had was just about, do we use the stamp collection to sort of do the featurettes and things, but I kind of grew into that, and by the time I started playing through the games, I kind of unlocked a lot of it anyway.
Yeah.
The fact I've only played the first 15 games, and they're all the older games, and I've still got another 15 games sat there to play, and I felt as good as I did after that, as I do still with more to play. And the way it was presented, the way it's ported, honestly, I can't think of something that would probably have a better value collection than what this was. I kind of want to hear what you say before I give it a score.
That's fair enough.
Because it's got nothing to do with the score necessarily, but I just want to kind of feel like, you know.
So I have not. It's not like I've played the remainder of all of the games on the collection, right? And as I sit here right now, I'm quietly paranoid that I've somehow played something that isn't on the collection or something like that. In fact, I know I've played something that isn't on the collection because the Battletoads is the convenient segue here. I play Battletoads on the Mega Drive.
Oh, okay.
And my note is just NES plus blast processing equals radical. Still a bastard. And it is a bastard. And I also still could not get past the turbo tunnel.
Honestly, it's so hard.
But it looks gorgeous. As a 16-bit sort of version, it looks lovely. But I did also dabble very, very briefly with the 2020 Battletoads. No, not even reboot, like updated flavour. I didn't really get on with it terribly well. I get how it feels like Battletoads, and I get how it looks great. It looks like a Saturday morning cartoon. The humour did not necessarily land with me. The kind of tongue-in-cheek fourth wall breaking thing.
Yeah.
Remember this point. I will come back to it later.
Okay, cool. That was the important point, right?
That was the important point.
Excellent.
Because I think there's a sort of start of a bit of a thread here. However, onto the N64. So I'm going to start with Killer Instinct Gold, which I'm hoping is on the collection.
I thought it was, yeah. Right.
So I was playing on an N64 with a cartridge, so it looked quite blurry, but it had quite nice, sharp sort of polygons in the background. The characters were a bit fuzzy, but it actually, at least through the way I was playing my N64 with I've got a little HDMI converter thing and all that kind of stuff. It actually is probably one of my better looking cartridges at the moment. And my other note beyond that was, where was this when I was growing up?
Yeah.
Like, I bloody loved that. That was great.
Yeah, I saw it on there and I was like, I thought of you when I thought, Rich has played this.
It ticks a lot of my boxes. Don't get me wrong. It's not like it's suddenly one of my favourite fighting games ever, but it's definitely better than I ever gave it credit for before. Yeah. Like, going back now, knowing what I know about how to play some of these things, I'm like, yeah, you know what? This ticks a lot of boxes. So, like, if only I knew then what I know now, basically. Blast Corps. This one is a bit of an odd duck. So I started playing it on Switch Online way back when. I do not have Switch Online anymore. However, I have since procured a second-hand copy of Blast Corps. I have not been able to work out how to erase the data on it. So I have a basically completed copy of Blast Corps. So I've jumped from like the very initial, like, this is how you start to play the game, to suddenly having everything unlocked and a load of high scores from Daz. So
yes, Daz.
Well done, Daz.
Daz and Faz.
I think Daz basically finished it, as best I can tell. But it does mean that I now know that there is far more variety in the game than I perhaps was going to give it credit for. Had we been having this conversation, I don't know, 6 months ago or whatever. But it's simple arcade nonsense. You know, you're either blowing stuff up or you're racing, and that's about it. But it looks good. Handles quite well. I could see why perhaps some of the missions might feel a little bit obtuse and like you're not entirely sure what you should be doing, or you somehow managed to finish it and you're kind of not really sure what you've done or not done. But on the whole, pretty good fun. Jet Force Gemini. I really enjoyed this back when I was younger. Bit harder to control now. For some reason, I just wasn't gelling with the controls as much as I think I did back then. However, playing it now, I think I've basically played it for exactly as long and realised how little through the game I got, if that makes sense. So it's like you were saying about your son rewatching the intro to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie 15 times. I think maybe Jet Force Gemini is one of those games that I've started dozens of times and like not got past comically early and still
I'm having a great time.
But my wife came through when it first started up and you have the kind of blaring theme tune and they're all running along and all that. First thing she said, very Saturday morning, isn't it? And it is. Again, see also Battletoads 2020. Like there's a Saturday morning vibes, I think, a kind of rare thing. Yes,
very much so.
A lot of the time. But yeah, like fiddly, blurry and violent nice. Is what I've got here, which could also be, 3 of the 7 Dwarfs or whatever. Perfect Dark.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Perfect Dark. This was one of my favourites. Is it still one of my favourites? It's aged.
You spoke about the
okay.
multiplayer sort of concept of it. When
I will forever and a day have a very, very special place in my heart for this game. But going back to it was a bit tricky. Now, I actually played the Xbox 360 version of it and the N64 one I dabbled with, right?
Yeah.
And I think, like, I totally contradict myself, right? Because I've got, like, having two analog sticks for playing Perfect Dark on the Xbox 360, pretty good. But then I played the N64 version, and I've got, actually, does the N64 version play better?
Oh, okay.
Like, and I think that's a tricky one. I don't think it's a hot take, but I could see why you could make the argument either way. I think for me personally, having played both in pretty quick succession, I think I found having two sticks a bit weird.
Oh, right, okay.
Like, having not played it for several years and then picking it up on my Xbox 360 a while back, it was like, yeah, cool, I can play Perfect Dark with two analog sticks and controls that are much more like what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Great. However, going back and playing it on the N64, I'm like, I don't know if it was just muscle memory kicking back in or what, but there was just something about it. It might have just been the snappiness of the auto aim or something like that. Yeah. But like having the C buttons and the one analog stick, it just seemed to feel a bit better.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the Snake game that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is one of those ones where just there was something about the controls that they just managed to nail it, and like they've translated it well.
Yeah.
But playing them back to back, I couldn't help but feel like there was perhaps something a little spark that was somehow missing, and I don't know if it was just like the way the gun was aiming or something like that. I think if I've got two analog sticks, especially nowadays, you kind of get into that Call of Duty-esque mindset where you think you can look down the sights and it's going to respond a certain way. Whereas I think having the N64 controller in my hand, I had different expectations of what it would control like, because I knew it wouldn't be quite as accurate and I'd be relying on auto aim more. I think it was something like that. But it was a weird one, and I didn't appreciate it until I started playing and trying to work out what was going on.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a great game. Of course it is.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to bother telling you about it, because what am I going to say that's new? But that was the only thing that made me think, oh, actually, like, maybe I think still the N64 version for me just pips it.
Yeah.
Just.
Oh, okay. I think it's the 360 version that's on Rare Replay, actually.
Well, funnily enough, that was another thing I was going to ask about. Another game that's going to come up reasonably soon, but not this one. Banjo-Kazooie, as you remember, but snappier. This was the Xbox 360 version again that I was playing, rather than the N64 one. But this was great. Like, this is the 360 version just looked so crisp, plays exactly like I remember it. You know. That old thing of a remaster sort of playing and looking like the version in your head. I think for me, the Banjo-Kazooie is definitely closer to it than Perfect Dark was.
I wonder if it just feels like probably Rare's most loved games, that the Kazooie, Tooie and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's in a way that it's just like their most original sort of... Because the thing is, Donkey Kong and GoldenEye aren't original, but like for an original concept, it feels like Banjo-Kazooie is probably the thing that everyone goes, oh yeah, that's, like you said, the Saturday morning sort of like amazing platformer sort of feel.
But all of this is kind of making me want to go back to Donkey Kong 64
and
try that as well, and just be like, how does this all fit in? But this is a convenient segue, and I'm jumping forward a bit for a reason that will become clear. So I'm going to jump forward to Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, which I believe is on the collection.
Yes, I think that's the last game on there.
I don't think it was particularly well received when it came out, but I have a soft spot for it, for reasons that I'm not entirely sure I fully understand. Because what I've got here is creative, but not as creative as it thinks. You're making these vehicles to go and do these objectives, but ultimately, it's not like it's sort of Lego and completely freeform. Like, there are kind of constraints to what you can do.
Yeah.
Because how else could it function, right? Like, I get it. But at the same time, it does kind of create the impression that you're going to be able to be ultra creative with it, and perhaps
there are three presets.
It's but it's cool. It's cool. I kind of like it. But what jumped out at me was there's a lot of cheeky asides, fourth wall breaking, and I've written here basically the 2020 Battletoads plot, where Banjo and Kazooie are kind of washed up and past their prime and suddenly thrust into this situation. And it's... so you kind of feel like maybe Rare in that sort of self-reflective kind of mode. Someone should check on Rare. It's basically what I'm saying. I think they've been on a decline for a while now.
When they're saying about the Everwild thing, they're just sat there going, fuck.
Yeah,
it's going to do all work.
I think they
Phil
needed
Spencer's
Sea of
here,
Thieves.
everyone sit up.
So, good luck to them. I do have another one, and then I'll come back. So Viva Pinata. I also touched on. Looks great on the Xbox 360. What I always liked about it is that, it's this kind of cutesy, light garden sim type thing where you're attracting these creatures to your garden and then scooping up sweets when they get bopped open.
Nice.
And all that stuff. It's weirdly dark. It's got those kind of dark undercurrents that like Animal Crossing is quite good at doing as well. And it like that kind of shit. I love that.
It always feels like Alice in Wonderland-esque.
Just with a slightly darker soul to it. And I really appreciate that. I do have written here Rare's best game.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Question mark.
Yeah.
I don't know, but like
that's high praise.
2025, Richard might prefer it to Perfect Dark.
That's...
Maybe does he? I don't know, but maybe. I can tell you what I don't prefer though.
Oh,
here's your hot take: Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Oh,
yeah.
No.
I absolutely adored this game when I was younger. Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny as hell, right? And I thought it was great to play. This is the Xbox version, which I believe is quite different to the N64 original.
Okay.
Anyway, they tweaked some bits, added some stuff in. Yeah. Obviously, the controls are different and all that kind of stuff. They kind of made the fur look fuzzier and all that. And it's just not as I remembered it.
Oh.
Like, it's just... And I had that weird moment of like, maybe I have actually grown up. Yeah. For everything, in spite of everything, maybe I have actually grown up. I just did not find it funny at all. And without that humour to drag you through it, what's left is perhaps not as great a platformer as I thought it was. I could be playing Banjo-Kazooie instead, you know?
I think that... that you're probably feeling the exact same way that the developers do on that one. If I'm going to be honest, if you watch the featurette about Conker's Bad Fur Day, you can see them all cringing about it almost. And like, the chap who had the main idea was like, I can't believe I kind of did that. And it was like, which not to the point where it's like, oh, it's, grotesque or anything. But I think that, like you say, the jokes probably landed when you were like 21 maximum maybe, and then after that
I don't know. I'm not even sure about that. But like the voice acting is just like, occasionally you'll have these things where like you'll have a line of dialogue
they talk about that too,
that is very much British slang that is delivered in like a Bronx accent, and it's just wrong. Right, it is just wrong. There's a moment or two like that, and you're just like, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah.
And
I've never been enticed to want to play this since I've read about it or heard about it necessarily.
So this is the thing, like at the time-ish, I was playing a lot of Diddy Kong Racing. So like Conker as was originally planned, I was familiar with him. Yeah. And then this new version of it appears. That's kind of cool. That's different. That's interesting. It's the same part of my brain that appreciates wrestling. When, a character goes away and comes back and they're a bit different, or they've been revamped, or they have a heel turn, or, all that stuff. It taps into that same part of my brain. And there is something inherently interesting to me about that. However, with the distance I now have from that and not being as young as I was, it loses so much of the oomph. And then what doesn't help is that, the thing that I was checking earlier on was down at CEX, like unboxed copy of original Conker's Bad Fur Day, £110.
Oh my god!
Mint copy with the box and the manual. Granted, it's all cardboard stuff, so it's always going to be a premium anyway. £320.
Oh.
And you're just like, okay, so it's 320 quid to play the game that I remember that I'm not even entirely sure I would like.
Oh, jeez.
And
Wow.
you're just like, okay, well, I'll stick with the Xbox version.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
quietly
It
thinking,
is on Rare
like,
Replay, guys.
but this is the thing, like, and I think if it's in a toss-up between playing this version of Conquer or indulging that nostalgia and getting the N64, for the love of God, get Rare Replay.
Yeah.
Like, please get Rare Replay, because that game alone, like, let alone the rest of it, like, it's. I think that despite my misgivings about it, just from a
pure value
perspective, I think it's worth it for that alone. And that's the end of my report.
Dude, that was awesome. Thank you very much. The reason I wanted to leave the score was because I wanted to hear how much value there was in having the later games
convenient.
as well. Yeah. Just because it was almost like I know fine well that a lot of them are extremely well regarded, or at least certainly were, and it's interesting to hear how the variance on, as a mid-30s gamer, like, as in, do you how much value do you sort of see in those nowadays? To hear that Viva Pinata is like great, and I'm like, so that makes me feel like I'm probably going to go away and dip back into that more like than I would to go back to Conquer, for example. I mean,
like with so many of these conversations we've had, it was kind of cool to go back through and go, like, some of these are games that I loved when I was younger, but going back through now and realizing how my tastes have changed.
Yeah.
When occasionally I'll sit here and because I work in the same room that my collection's in, and it's quite easy to look over and go, fuck me, I should grow up sometime. And then you sort of, you play these games, you're like, oh no, I have.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, no, it's
I'm
okay.
doing fine.
I just have them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the trick is I earned them, and I
Yeah.
didn't have to get someone else to buy them for me.
Exactly, yeah. And you can look at them, read the manuals and shit. So that has tipped me back into where I thought I was going to go with this. So I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10.
Cool.
So, again, a subjective sort of point of view, but you cannot fault this collection for how much it gives you. For now, especially if you get on Game Pass for, the money you pay for Game Pass for everything else. Game Pass has been absolutely knocking out the park with stuff recently. Like, and I've heard Expedition 33, for example, last week is like absolutely incredible and stuff. And it's just like, so you more than get your value out of the new games, but to have Rare Replay sat in the background and still be there, and all these games that are there, I implore anybody who enjoys retro gaming at all to kind of think that some of the best ways to experience games from the 80s are to go back and play these games from Rare Replay. That is absolutely stunning, even the early 90s as well. And then to hear how much fun you kind of had playing your games, and how many different games you could play, the eclectic nature of it, even the ones that kind of feel like a bit clangers nowadays, you can still go back and play them for £300 less.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I've got no qualms saying that this is one of the best things out there for a gamer to go and experience. It really filled me with joy for a few weeks to kind of go in and spend some time with these games, even the ones that I thought were shit. I was like, but it really brought out the correspondent in me that almost feel like, I'm going to be really happy to bring these stories, even these sort of 3 or 4 line reviews from these games, to say, oh, this is great, or this is shit. That is in because I just had so much fun doing it, and that Saturday morning feeling that is in the whole time. So and that comes from Rare putting a lot of effort into making this a really great collection. And all the timeline stuff and museum stuff and history behind it, brilliant. Really, really good. So that's cool. You got any more to say? Huh?
No.
Awesome. Bye.
Cheers.